Joanna and I wanted to start with a rebus puzzle. So the whole key is this is the key to everything. So we wanted to start with a puzzle. So in the chat, let us know what is this saying? What does this say?
Take all guesses, so feel free to jump in and throw something out there.
Oh man. Okay, we know what kind of audience we have today. On the ball,
We're
on
gonna have to be on our
point.
toes.
AI is not the goal. That is so correct. Because we like to say that the goal is a radically student-centered environment. So we want to support students in an amazing way. And AI is a tool. It's not the goal. Oh, AI is a key to reaching the goal. Okay, I like that, Craig. I like that
Mhm.
as well because both fit, right? So that's kind of where we want to start. So it's not the goal, but it's an amazing tool that we've been able to utilize to help us create an even more promising learning experience for students.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that, how we don't want to lose sight of our main focus just being radically student-centered and what's it going to take to get there. Our main focus is not on, hey, we have to have AI. That just is a byproduct of where we're headed with our main goals.
Yeah, and really the way, so to kind of even more center around the student for our discussion, we have first is we come around and circle and compass the student with ed tech tools. We're kind of separating ed tech tools from AI in our conversation. And then we have course content, the entire academic team, the success team, and artificial intelligence as well, all kind of come together to support the student and make that radically centered student environment. This is not even a full list. Joanna, can you think of anything that I omitted on accident? These are just kind of the big five because that's all the room that I had on my slide for this.
Yeah. Yeah. And why we like this picture is it just gives us a visual of what we're trying to do here. So we've got the student in the center, and, notice that we don't have the faculty in the center. We don't have AI in the center. We don't have the content in the center. We've got the student in the center, and we're trying to build all this other stuff around the student. So we always want to keep this kind of vision, I guess, in mind as our way to be radically student centered.
Yeah, so that kind of frames our whole conversation for today, that student-centered thing. And the way this all started was really with discussions. And Joanna is thankfully here because she led these discussions with faculty and others. You want to let us know kind of how those
Mhm.
went and how you went about them because you led a lot of discussions.
I think when we first started hearing about AI, and you can share with me in the chat if this was your experience as well, but a lot of us as faculty were pretty nervous because our mind initially went right to, well, how are students going to use this to get through their coursework without actually doing it? And so, I will fully admit for myself, and maybe some of you can relate to this, I had a little bit of fear around it and maybe a little bit of negative perception around how it could be used in education. And so we just started to talk about it when we realized that this is just how it's going to be in the future. I mean, we're not getting rid of it, we're not going around it. It's here. And so we started to talk as faculty about how do we just gradually shift our mindset from kind of, how do we push back against this to how do we embrace this as something that's going to be supportive for faculty and for students and for all of us. So those were our initial discussions, and we kind of just shaped our vision of this whole thing we're going to present as a team. So through those discussions.
Yeah, and I was actually lucky enough to be a part of several of those discussions as a team member in there. And I just always appreciated the way that everybody's opinion was brought in because the minute that anyone's thoughts about it, whether they were founded or not, any worries that somebody
Mhm.
might have, it would shut down the AI conversation quickly at that time. I think
Right.
it's more open now because everybody's a little bit more familiar with it, but that was amazing to be a part of that. And then the next step, and we're going to dive into each one of these a little bit more. And the next step was learning. We had to learn about it. So we
Mhm.
we as faculty members, digital learning solutions members, we had to learn what it was, and we went about it in a very big way.
Yeah.
But it
Yeah. We all
started.
kind of came in. I think, after those initial kind of, whoa, what's going to happen here? We started to open our minds a little bit and get curious about, well, what are other institutions doing? What are students doing? Questions are we being asked? Just how can we get creative around this instead of resistant to it, I guess would be a good way to put it from a faculty standpoint.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. And that's exactly where it went. So the more we learned, the more we saw it as a tool and as a part
Mhm.
of that radically student-centered environment, as opposed to something bigger that many of us thought. I thought in the beginning too. I was interested in how it was all going to play out as well. And
Yeah.
then,
Yeah. George
yeah, go
Wayne's
ahead.
putting a good comment in the chat. Artificial intelligence does not inevitably lead to artificial learning. Authentic learning is promoted by good use of AI, which I think is,
Yes.
something we kind of came around to with our thinking as well.
Yes, because and I love that. Thanks for pointing that out because we know that active learning creates more durable learning, and AI is a tool that can really accentuate active learning within, especially asynchronous online courses. It's kind of
Mhm.
amazing for that. So
Mhm.
that's where it is good for a tool. So after all this learning, we piloted. And how did we pilot? We grabbed a partner. Nectar was our partner because they were up and coming and very nimble, and they wanted to really create a space for students because they have an amazing story. If you've never heard their story from Kavita, they're one of the co-founders. You should listen to her story. It's a kind of amazing, but it was founded on creating that radically student-centered experience. So that's why we went with Nectar to have our pilot program,
Mhm.
and it was highly successful. We'll get into the stats with that for a minute. And then from the pilot, we then said, hey, these results were awesome. So we're going to do a full implementation. Anybody want to take a wild guess on how quick or how slow it took to do the full implementation from the pilot? Let me hear it in the chat. How
Go ahead and
many
guess in the chat
months?
if you want to take a stab at that. Shirley said it was quick. Yes. How
Yeah, it
quick?
was quick. Are we talking days, months, week, six
We got to
months?
guess for 6 months from April, 1 month from Gordon, 18 months from Todd.
Man, it literally took us once. We said this, we were 4 weeks in an 8 week term, I believe.
Mhm.
Uh, and I believe it was fall two. So we were going to run it live summer one. So in 4 weeks, we went from pilot to say, hey, this is having a big effect to
Yep.
full implementation, 4 weeks. Yvonne knew it was 4 weeks because she was one that was in the pilot, and she did an amazing job uh, piloting this. So it was absolutely outstanding.
Yep. Yeah, it was. We right away realized, well, I think we're onto something here. We've got to go quickly with this.
Yeah, so it's always nice, kind of like whenever you're in a study and the findings are coming back so positive, you have to implement. You just have to break from the study and actually do it. So
Mhm.
these next three, so Joanna led the discussions with faculty, staff, everybody. She's just an amazing mentor and lead on these discussions. And we want to see, so this is going to be a little bit of a game at this point. Um, how many of you, what is this person that's coming up feeling, and how many of you had this feeling towards AI when it first came out? And then Joanna, if you could tell us how you kind of worked with folks that may have been feeling that, may not be to the extent of these, but we wanted to overemphasize the people. So are you ready? On your
Mhm.
mark, get set. Okay. Who was this person when AI came out besides me? I fell into that camp. I fell
Definitely.
into that camp.
And Shirley says me in the chat. Yes, we were all thinking we know this is a huge game changer. We don't know how or where this is going, but there's no going back.
Yeah. We don't know how this is going to work out, but we know it's working out. So we're going to
Yep.
go. Who else? So, Joanne, how did you work with folks such as myself who were kind of on that edge of let's go? This is fun. Me,
Uh,
but not now. I love that, Deb. I love that. So we learned a little bit and kind of tapered down. So
yeah,
what did you
yeah.
do in these discussions?
Well, I mean, I think we were bouncing off each other. Some of us were ready to go yesterday, and some of us were never doing this ever, no matter what happens, and making sure students never were, and it's banned, and that kind of thing. And so I think we were just kind of mellowing each other out, bringing each other more toward the center. So by having these conversations, we were making sure we weren't getting way too ahead of ourselves, and we were making sure that, we were going forward. So yeah, we were definitely kind of moving each other all toward the center.
That's, yeah, and that really worked well. So now who was this person? What is that?
That's a typical faculty member.
Somebody like, mm-hmm. So so
Let me think
what is
about
this
this
person
first.
feeling?
Yeah,
Skeptical.
skeptical.
Okay,
Yes,
thanks,
Robert.
Robert. Uh, skeptical. Is anybody else, were you skeptical or are you skeptical with the use of AI now?
In the chat, did anybody have this reaction? I know I did at first. I was definitely just kind of on edge about what students were going to do with it. Yeah, Thomas Middlebrook saying my colleagues were here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Skepticism's a good place to be because you can land on either side. You just
yeah,
want to prove it, right? This is probably me, Melanie.
yeah.
Okay.
Lots
Ethical
of ethical
questions.
questions
Yeah.
remain open, and Melanie says, and I agree. And I've been a faculty member long enough to know that we don't love change so much, so it's hard.
Nice. And well,
Yvonne thought AI was cheating, but Todd convinced me it'd be a great tool for brainstorming. Good. Yeah, I like that kind of growth mindset there.
oh, doc, not skeptical, but nervous. I like that.
hmm Yep. Yeah. And Deborah, that's a good point. The more you understand it, the more you're embracing it. I think that's a pretty typical response for us too.
Yeah. And then Michael, he was at first he was skeptical, then he realized what a great tool it was and kind of moved in that direction. So a lot of us are in a lot of different spaces, which is good. And then was there anybody with this one? Did anybody have that thought process right up front or feeling right up front?
Yeah,
And
I think
Joanne,
we colleagues like that, April for sure. Lots of faculty, yes. Yeah. Most of my
I
writer
love that.
friends, Sean. Yeah, I can see that. Just feeling like their space was being, kind of trampled on a little.
Yeah, you don't want that in the way.
hmm Yeah.
Yeah. So we all know folks kind of in this whole um, emotional space with AI, and many of us have probably felt all three. Sometimes at the same time, we didn't
I was
know
gonna
which way
say
to
all in the
go,
same
right?
moment sometimes. Wow, this is cool, but kind of scary, and I'm not into it.
Right, because they can all live together. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's like the Brady Bunch. They're all living together. Uh, so Joanna, how did you handle all of these emotions in one conversation?
I think the biggest thing we did as, that helped us make fast progress is lots of listening, just way more listening than talking. I mean, we were fortunate to have a group of colleagues here who all of us realized right away that we didn't have the answer. None of us had done this before. None of us were an expert. So we just really kind of opened our ears,
Oh,
took in everybody's ideas, really considered them, tried to work with them. We were open-minded about changing our own initial concepts about what this was going to be like. So, it was just, we did a good job of working as a team and hearing each other.
that's amazing. And then from all of that, we kind of came to the point where we wanted to engage in the learning piece a lot more because, like you said, you are amazing at how you brought in question thinking, if you will. That's what I like to call it. But you brought in people being more inquisitive rather than judgmental about it, so we could be open to say, okay, what really is this? And we went
Mhm.
into this learning stage. And then you and I both taught class. So I went in, I said, okay, I know I'm probably the dumbest person in the room, is generally what I think, especially when I'm around all the smart people that I get to hang around with every day. I get to be the dumbest person in the room. So I went and got a certification, and I think it was a 16-week course. I forget how long it was through the MIT professional development piece because I needed to know a lot more. And then once I did that, we started offering different courses. So I did teaching with AI for a badge, integrating AI into instructional design for a micro credential and a badge as well. And Joanna did the understanding artificial intelligence within healthcare professions. And what did you learn from teaching this and all the articles that you had in that class?
Yeah, that was a fun class to lead because I really set it up so we could dig into the current research. And so these were all current articles, just, from within the last 3 months, 4 months when we ran this. And, so really it was a complete learning experience for me too, because we're looking at current research and we were doing it mostly so students would get into the same headspace that we were growing into at that time, where we're starting to embrace this and realize we can be really creative and it's a supportive tool. And so to send students into, I mean, basically our main goal is these students are going out into the professional space and they're going to have these conversations. So one of our main goals was just to give them a language around that. So when this stuff comes up in an interview or when they're new on the job, that they have an awareness of the current research and what's happening and how these discussions are going and what role they might play and how AI in general is being used in healthcare. And so it was fun for me. I mean, it was just as much a learning experience for me as it was for, I think we had, 40 people who ended up going through this course that we offered. And so we all just would take a look at, 2 articles a week that were brand new and say, what do you think of this? How are you processing this? Is this going to come up in your career? And so, I mean, that's a fun way, for anyone who's looking to do a little bit of kind of extra for students, just to pull a really current article and start talking to them about this. What do you think about this? So you're going to see this in your career. When you do, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to talk about this in an interview and with your colleagues? And it was a cool experience. I enjoyed it a lot.
That's amazing. And I'm imagine the students went through that, got quite a bit, just like they did. So Callista's here on the uh, call as well in the audience. She was one of the co-teachers of the integrating AI into instructional design because, as you can imagine, generative AI has had a big effect on instructional design. It already has in both higher education and industry as well. So we learned a ton from teaching this course. We taught it 3 times, and we'll be teaching it hopefully again. We're talking about when we'll offer it again. So, Calissa, if you're in the chat, just
Mhm.
chat. What was a big lesson that you learned from teaching this? And I'll give you time to do that, and I'll let everybody know. My biggest takeaway was that most people were inquisitive once they got to know what GPT, a generative pre-trained transformer was, and we got past a lot of the hype because there was a lot of hype. And once we were able to do that, they saw the benefits of using it and how it wasn't here to replace, but augment what they do. And that was kind of a big deal for us, especially in the instructional design field. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah. And another thing I want to mention, because I know we have lots of participants joining us from all over who might be here to try to generate their own ideas, is that if you want to think about doing something like this for students, don't feel like you have to be an expert going in. I mean, you can completely take my approach where, the work I did was setting it up and pulling those current articles, but I was learning right along with students. So don't feel like you have to know everything going in. Just feel like you have to be ready to, you know, dig into some current research and pull some great materials and learn right along with students, because that was my approach and it worked out really well.
and I would imagine that the students really appreciated you being open about that too.
Mhm.
They
It did.
that probably
Yeah,
gave
it
you some
did.
real big street cred, right?
I'm not sure, but I do know that they enjoyed the fact that it was a conversation for all of us, and I was very transparent about, this is new for me too, and so it was just a good collaborative experience.
That's awesome. And Callista, she said one of her big takeaways was just how many tools are out there and the amazing capabilities that they have. Because once you get to know how to use some of these tools, it's pretty awesome. So from here, so once we got educated and then started offering professional development courses as well, we went and we said, you know what, we need to pilot this. And the pilot was kind of awesome. Now, Craig Brewer is was one that helped pilot this. I want to say in your Psych 105 class, Craig. Let me know what your big learning was in that. And if I got the class wrong, because, me and numbers, we can get them wrong. But we piloted, right? And we started sharing the outcomes and the feedback we were getting from students with everybody. So we had a really slick way of just Spark was there and then click. They could leave feedback to us within Slack in one click. They could go to Spark and start engaging with the conversation. And we're going to really kind of jump into that even more in a moment. So these are the results. What were your initial thoughts on the results, Joanna?
I was surprised that students were so engaged with Spark right from the beginning. And Craig put in the chat that students loved having someone available 24/7 with just being able to engage with Spark and ask questions back and forth. And I found that too, because a lot of my students are so busy that they're doing coursework, at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m. And if they're emailing me at that time, I'm sleeping. So I jump on early in the morning, but not that early. And so I think right away we started to realize that it was engaging for them and reducing their sense of isolation, and they were just into it probably more than any of us even imagined that they would be. They were just, it's a really good tool. And so it was very interactive. If they had a question through the material, it was giving them responses that were pretty spot on, as we were testing it out. And so right away we saw that it was something that students were very excited about. Yeah. And I noticed, I think Craig said students began to worry about not having Spark in future classes. So it caught right on.
Yeah, it really did. And it was kind of amazing how well it caught on because the GPA was a big difference. The average final score, so GPA and average final score are sort of related. But what I loved was the motivation and the self-efficacy scores between those who used it and those who did not have the opportunity to use it. So that was a big difference for me in terms of what I was looking at with that. So I thought it was very interesting to be able to see that. What are some thoughts about the motivation, self-efficacy, and grades within the pilot? What do some people think? Oh, okay. So Todd said those success numbers are great. Yvonne was amazed about how the students loved it. Tay
Mhm.
was, I might have missed it, but can you give a sense of how many students courses you're talking about for that data? Okay, so for this data, it was 3 courses, and each course we ran 6 courses total. 3 had the Spark and 3 did not. And that's what we use as our pilot to say, okay, do we want to go any further with this or not?
And each
And
course probably, what do you think are like low 20s students, 22, 24, somewhere in that range, George?
yeah, right around that range. So there was over 100 or between 60 and 80 in each group is where it ended up
Mhm.
being the end.
Yvonne was part of the pilot as well, and she's saying that she noticed that students who used AI got much better grades and wrote better essays than those who didn't use it. So those who were piloting it for us just saw this, right away. They were like, wow, this actually, I think we're onto something.
This works like a champ. And the interesting piece is that it doesn't uh, write the essays for students. And the data that we have now shows that they're not using it at time spans just to do their work. They're engaging it with it in different times. So it's the data is showing that they're using it for learning, which is kind of cool.
And then just to address the 2 other questions that are coming in, we're going to give you a little demo of how it looks and works, and what students talk about how students can use it a little bit. So as Michael's asking what was in Spark and how did students use it. So we're going to keep digging into that. So for just a second here coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. We will. 100%. So with that, so that was the pilot, and then we went into full implementation. Are we ready to see if the numbers match or not?
Let's see
Because
it.
we weren't certain, because go from a small sample to a much larger sample of over, it was 2039, I believe, was the sample.
Mhm.
And that's
Yeah.
ready. And, it
Yeah.
didn't
Yes,
do
we
it.
went from very small to very big in a snap.
Yeah. So we had to look and say, okay, are we doing the right thing? We wanted to see if we're right. So what we found was for the summer one terms, so this is one term, there were 23,108 messages between students and Spark. 3,597 conversations. So a conversation is a subset of messages, right? Sometimes some students would just leave it open for a while and they would just ask multiple things. So that's why there's such a large disparity. So um, 23,000 messages, 3,500 conversations, 2,093 says grades, but students it was available to at that time. And the grades, those who use Spark, that was the GPA overall. Those that did not use Spark, dun dun dun. Anybody want to take a guess? Did it was it kind of similar to the pilot, or did it go the different direction where people who didn't use it got a better grade? Anybody want to take a wild guess?
Somebody will guess for us. Todd saying 2.7 for those who
Oh,
didn't use it.
I'd say 2.7. Actually, it was summer, so there's probably the more motivated folks trying to get through everything in summertime. And it was a 3.04 GPA for that summer, just that summer one term. So it's still a very significant difference between
Mhm.
the two. So it did make a huge impact. And what was kind of crazy is the data. Joanna and I were talking about this morning actually, and look at the data, the average GPA, we broke it down by ethnicity. And what the coolest thing that I learned from our data is that the use of the AI course assistant, the AI tool Spark, was the same across all factors.
Mhm.
It didn't make a difference because of age, didn't make a difference because of ethnicity. It had an impact. And the statistics show that out, such as the dark orange are the folks who used Spark, and the light orange, we can call that a burnt orange maybe, is are the folks who did not use Spark. And that's a direct correlation to grade point averages. So that was kind of interesting to see. So it
Yeah,
was
and
significant.
it's been fun to kind of break this data apart like this because, we're still really in that learning phase where we're trying to see what kind of impact this has and for who it has an impact and in what way. So we're just breaking it apart any way we can think of, and consistent with what George is showing here with GPA in this chart, it just seems to hold no matter how we break it down and look at it.
Yeah, which is great, right? And the reason why we're breaking it down so much is because I believe I forget who, but somebody in the chat brought up there's a lot of ethical concerns. And yeah, we want to make sure that we're not creating an ethics issue, uh, by the infusion of Spark within our courses. So
Mhm.
that was very nice to see. So in the age bracket as well, I mean, even people might have some predetermined notions on who uses technology or not, but when it comes to AI tools, it had the same effect across all spectrums of any of these uh, categories of age. So 21 and under, 65 and over, it even had one. So it has a positive impact across the board. So that was
Yeah.
age.
Yeah, and like George said, part of the reason we're trying to break it down and learn as much as we can about how it impacts different demographics, is we're just trying to make sure, we're not advantaging one group over, just seeing who's using it how, and it's just really cool. It just seems to hold, that little bump in GPA. For us, it's a big deal. We're obviously, as everyone here is, really focused on that, and so we're just liking what we're seeing when we break
Mhm.
down this data.
Yeah, and when we think of how this is just one piece of that ecosystem that supports the student, of that bump from AI, student success, the academic team, the course content, other ed tech tools, if each one gives a little bit of a bump, oh my goodness, all of a sudden
Mhm.
we have super successful students who can go out into the wild and
Right.
actually perform, right?
And another way we keep thinking about this is if you remember that picture we showed, I think on the third slide where the student was in the center and all of the, the curriculum, the faculty, the success team, AI was all around the students. So we're not trying to make this the end all be all of the way we approach a student. This is just one little piece of it. And like George said, when one little piece of it can create a tiny bump, if everything around the student does that, then we feel like we're in business.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so important because there is no one thing. And that's what I love about AI. In the initial, the folks with my attitude was like, hey, this could be that one thing, but it's never one thing. It's a whole
Mhm.
bunch that come together. And this was kind of cool by gender, no difference there as well. Each one had a bump with GPA when they use it versus did not use it. So that was kind of cool to see. And then we looked at to see if the number of messages that a person engaged Spark with, if that had a difference, made a difference in their GPA. And we used a regression analysis. And there was no difference in the number of activities. And we didn't see any spikes on the days when, or the day before when assignments were due, things like that. So that's how we know that it was getting good use across the spectrum. It just wasn't being focused on the day that, oh, I need a discussion question or I need this in. They were using it pretty consistently over the term. So that was
Mhm.
kind of cool.
Yep.
So before we get into the demo, does anybody have any questions or thoughts about that before we jump in? And we'll have some fun with the demo.
Yeah, we're gonna keep looking at our demographics and break them down as many ways as we can just to learn as much as possible. So that was just some of the initial data that we have that we're learning from and working with.
Uh, Okay, so you are in a Psych 670 course. Whoops, where am I? I'm sorry. I had all the wrong stuff open for you. Sorry about that. Um, in the assistant settings, notice we have general setting. This sets everything up. The knowledge that the assistant has, they have topic knowledge. So what does that mean? So it's trained on a large language model, and Nectar did an amazing job with this. So it's trained on that model, and we have it trained on the course of record, so the content that's in the course that we owned, any OER content, the syllabus, things like that. That's what it's trained on. So it has that context in there. And really, what we're working on now is we're creating better prompts for Spark because the prompt here, that's their personality. So this is the personality of the assistant. That's pretty big, right? So we wanted it to be upbeat, encouraging course assistant for a course, in this case, Psych 670, Fundamental Principles of Research and Design in Social Sciences. Do not create content for the students. The primary outcome for the course is a research proposal in APA format. So it just gives context. So the way I think about it, and Joanna, jump in on how you think about it as well, but I think about it as it's an assistant. So if I had a human assistant, I want to give it as much detailed contextual information as I can so they can do their best job to get whatever's needed. Right. So that's kind of the comparison that I make. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts about it? Because you use these all the time.
Yeah, well, one thing I think is important to note, and Yvonne mentioned this in the chat too, and I tried this out in my own class. I said, I asked it to straight up write an essay, like basically to do the assignment for me, and it did not do it. And Yvonne, you had that experience as well, right? You put in the chat, I tested Spark and asked it to read an essay for me, maybe even write an essay for me, and it did not do it. And we have it in, its learning prompt, do not create content for students. So it engages really well when you ask a question or, ask for context or start bouncing ideas back and forth. But it will not create the content for you. Yvonne saying, correct, Spark passed my test. I like that you gave it a test. I did the exact same thing. Some nervous faculty members were like, do this assignment for me, and it did not do it. So yeah, it just but when I was asking it questions like, why is homeostasis important, it gave me really good information. So it's trained very well.
That's awesome. And Todd, you were here. Todd's here as well, and he was part of that pilot. If you have anything to interject, please do. Um,
Now,
and oh,
I
sorry,
actually
go
asked
ahead.
Spark some things, just to give it a big test, what's the mission of LAPU and some broader things too outside my class, and it did a great job with that too.
Oh, let's ask it. Happy to help you. Los Angeles is a Christian university that integrates faith, life, and learning. The mission of LAPU is to provide a Christ-centered education that equips students to lead and serve in a diverse and changing world. The university aims at the development of the whole person, fostering. That's a pretty good answer.
Yeah, it is. And Yvonne's saying she asked Spark, what is the difference between, oh, let's ask it this, the difference between an effective and an ineffective thesis.
Oh, now notice. I'm going to say two things real quick. Notice, boom, it's always ending with a question, so it's very Socratic in nature because we want to have that conversation. And then now this one, so we're in a Psych 670 course, and I'm going to ask it about uh, the difference between effective and ineffective thesis, right? Yvonne teaches our English courses. So the bot's going to be the assistant. We don't call it a bot, we call it an assistant, is trained differently. So this is going to be an experiment to see if it can answer this question,
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
right? Okay, so Yvonne said the Psych Spark won't know the answer to this. Okay, let's take a quick vote. Who
That's
thinks
a good
Spark
point.
will know the answer and who thinks it will not know the answer?
I don't
I don't
know.
have an answer to this. So what do we think? Let's take a quick poll in the chat here. Right? Yes, if you think it'll get it, no if you don't think it will. Okay, April's got a yes, Robert,
I think it's
yes.
gonna
Who
get
else?
it.
Oh, yes, but pretty generic. Okay, we got a no and a whole bunch of yeses. Joanna, are we ready to hit the button here?
Let's
I
do
don't
it.
know. All right. Great question. Well, I liked my question, so I'm feeling affirmed. I know, so it's got to be a
We
psychology
we told it to be
assistant,
positive
right?
and upbeat.
Oh, wow. All right. So, Joanna, what do you think about that?
I like it. Clear, concise, specific. Yep, super important. Focused
Okay.
direction, clearly states the main point versus being vague, broad, general. Yep,
It knows. That's a
yep,
great point, Todd.
yep.
It works. So in Yvonne's class, it would probably have a little bit more specifics, right?
Hmm.
Because it's specifically trained on that, where it's not specifically trained on this. So let's ask it a question. So this course is on evaluation and assessment. How about what is the difference between a good evaluation and a bad evaluation?
And just pointing out at the bottom there, notice how it furthers the conversation. What do you already know? So just to engage back and forth.
Oh, okay, we're going to hit that question in just a moment. So now we're going to ask it about a psychological assessment, a good one and a bad one. Shannon, are you out there? She's
Yeah, right, Shannon is looking to know
don't,
this.
don't judge me on the way I wrote this question, please.
I mean, that's kind of one of the good things is it kind of knows what you mean, even if it's not perfect.
Right? Yeah. So kind of like how we started a lot of this stuff. We dove in and learned as we went. But that could be a legit question coming from a student, right? And once again, I am affirmed. I feel good. I feel good. Ooh, oh man. So that's pretty good. And then it's asking me what I already know about psychological assessments and their importance in research and clinical practice. How should I answer that question? Should I answer it so people could see what a conversation looks like with Spark?
Yes, you're not asking someone who knows much in this field, though. So any takers in the chat? What do we already know?
Yes, it does give a much more complete answer. Craig, what should I ask it, Craig? Or how should I respond to this question? Let's see. I know some, but only have a little knowledge. So I'm going to keep my response vague. Oh, a little knowledge. I was
Taking and typing
typing
at
what
the
I
same
was saying.
good skill.
Hey, that's okay. I'm affirmed again. This is my friend. Spark is my friend. And then it's asking me for examples.
Yeah.
So what's it doing here? This is active learning in its best. So it gave me a response, then it affirmed my thoughts to say, hey, it's okay if you don't know much, because it's upbeat. Remember, we put that in the prompt for it. And then it gave us some very specific content. And then it asked for examples. So it's treating me as an adult and using andragogy to kind of come back and try to connect with my previous experience. So it's pretty cool the way it's doing that. And let's see. Kay had a question. What are the possibilities for faculty to see a student's conversation threads to share them with faculty? So there is a history in there. And, Nectar is working on that. And I do not know the exact response to that because there's some effort going into that, but there is the possibility um, to that. But as right now, we're not seeing those conversations.
Right.
They are seeing them with the assistant. So there is conversation happening directly about that conversation, Tay.
Yeah. Yeah. And that would be a cool next step. And we're definitely all thinking about that. But yeah, you're right, George. We can't do that right now.
Awesome. So that is Spark in a nutshell. And see how it kind of always folds back the student, to the student. So that's how we created it as being student centered. You can create it however you feel is the best fit for your organizational culture, your university culture to work with students. That's kind of the neat part for me because useless trivia quiz, circa 1960. What was the name of the first? They called it a chatterbot in those days. What was the name of the chatterbot that was a psychologist? And we found out something very important from that. Oh, Eliza, I love it. And what did we learn
Lots of
from
people knew
Eliza?
that.
Yeah, it was circa 19, I want to say 1961, but I'm always off for some reason. Uh, we learned from Eliza that people open up to that chatterbot in that case faster than they would a therapist. So what does that mean? What takeaway can we do from that? Well, by students interacting with our course assistant, that's going to give them, remember, we looked back and we looked at efficacy and motivation. That gives them the efficacy to now be able to come to the professor and ask questions and be inquisitive. So it's helping them build that efficacy and that motivation to even grow further as they have conversations with a professor and ask them questions. So it's kind of cool. So it's not separating, it's bringing together. So it's helping people grow.
Mhm.
And
And then, they can share some of those conversations too, like, hey, this is what I asked and this is what I found out. And, I'm curious about this. So it's a good conversation starter as well.
yes, it is. And one thing we're looking into right now is the grades of from faculty members who embraced it and really, like Yvonne was saying, how she puts her um, conversations with Spark in discussion questions and or discussion responses and stuff just to show students. We're going to look and say, hey, is that making a difference in their outcomes as well? Because we don't know. We need to know. We
Yeah.
really want to know answers to that, which would be amazing. So from that perspective, so the demo is fairly straightforward. We saw how it worked, how it was trained, the knowledge that it holds, and that it actually helps with student efficacy to be able to come to you and have conversations. Any questions about that before we move on? Well, we're at the Q&A, so I guess any questions?
Yeah, we just wanted to open it up to hear some thoughts. What are you thinking about this? Is this something you could use? We can just go general for a minute. What kind of feedback, questions, thoughts do you have?
All right. Thanks, Matthew.
Bon had a question about whether there's going to be voice prompts available. That I don't know. Do you, George?
That is in the works. So our goal is to have that.
Cool. Yeah. Um, so can you talk, George, a little bit about how we train it on specific content? Any concerns over intellectual property rights, in-house material?
Yes, we are definitely we are on the side of not uploading any material to it if we think there's going to be any, like, no textbooks like that. And that's almost seems like, super obvious. You're not going to take somebody's copyrighted material of a textbook and upload it into Spark. No, we don't do that.
Mhm.
That's just not going to happen. If it's OER and it's open for, I forget the license under it. I want to say share and share alike or whatever. There's licenses that can allow us to do that. So we look at that. The content that we make, because we make quite a bit of content um, for the courses, that is absolutely uploaded because that's LAPU owned content. So that goes in there. And that's why it's fine for us to upload the syllabus as well. So all the rubrics, all the assignment instructions, all the syllabi, all of that goes into Training Spark. And really, that's an ethical area that you bring up, Matthew, that you know we have to be very cognizant about and aware of all that's happening in that area, because that's constantly shifting as well. So we err on the side of safety and caution when it comes to what material we upload. We do give it access to limited knowledge of the large language model, though, as you saw.
And to Melanie's question, I think, we do train it on our own things that we create for sure. So yeah, that's all in there for students to ask about.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. I'm in a test environment, so let's see if this one's on. So what do I do? What is assignment one about? And this is a test environment here, so it may or may not
See how it does.
uh, be uploaded. Yeah. Oh, it's a crucial step in the journey. Boom. It just explained to me the assignment.
And then it's asking what I like, and I've done this exact same thing, but I like that part at the bottom. What specific aspect of assignment one are you curious about? Because who likes it when a student asks you, yeah, I don't understand. Can you help me? Can you tell me? Like, let's get a little more specific. So I like that it's doing that same coaching. Yes, I'm happy to. I'd love to. Can you be a little bit more specific?
Let's see, Lois, are there or
Yeah.
will there be requirements for students and instructors to use Spark? Oh, that would kind of be a Wayne question, wouldn't that be, Joanna? So I'm not,
I don't have the answer to that one.
we are looking at building Spark into like certain assignments or discussions to see how that'll work. But as we do everything first, we'll pilot it out first, have lots of conversations about it. The nice part about working at LAPU, the conversations happen pretty quickly. So we don't span them over years and years of time. We do them fairly rapidly, thanks to Joanna's proactiveness and love of conversation.
We gotta get to this. And Wayne is here, and I believe has audio. Is there anything we left out or we should be talking about or mentioning in the last 5 minutes or so?
Well, just one thing that came to mind was that as we launched this product, we worked very much with a minimum viable product model to launch it. That is, we developed what we needed to get it going and get it up and running, and recognized that we would need to iterate as we learned more about it through the use of it. And I think that's an important um, principle approach to this sort of project, is recognizing we don't have to have everything completely perfectly worked out before we move forward with it, because otherwise it would take years to launch. And so that helps explain why we were able to launch in 4 weeks, as George and Joanna explained earlier. It's a philosophy, it's an agile approach to the way we work, and that's something that here at LAPU we've tried to make our approach to academic matters and other matters in the university.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think it's nice to be able to be transparent with students about that too. You know, sometimes it does not happen much, but sometimes, you know, I'll get a student saying, you know, I got this kind of like answer that seems a little off. And I'm the first to explain, you know, thanks for letting me know that, or this is new for us. And so I guess to add on to what Wayne said, we're also not pretending that we have it all worked out. So that's really helpful for everyone too.
And one other way in which we did that was when a student asked, well, what can I do with this particular program? We actually were able to very quickly train Spark on how to answer that kind of question. And so that's another example of how we were able to iterate quickly and get the students the kind of information they needed.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a lot
Great
of fun.
point. Yep, and I have to give a shout out to Mike Wilday and Ryan Rufner and Matthew Loriaga, who made that 4-week implementation plan happen really smoothly. You know, and we went in knowing that we were going to have to iterate and adjust. So that was a big deal. So well done. Yes, it is familiar with late work policies, Todd. And Matthew, I want to say Matthew had a question. Tay had a question. It is implemented into every single class that we have, and it is not mandatory to use. It is there if people want to use it or not. So our next webinar is going to be Thursday, September 19th at 11 o'clock. And that's going to be a good one because Jennifer Gitcom and is that Daniel Toronis is going to are going to be the presenters for that one, I believe. Is that correct? And they're going to be talking about AI powered feedback and how AI helps give feedback and opens up your time to have experiential conversations with them. Have you practiced with feedback with using Spark or anything, Joanna?
I haven't. Nope. I'm excited about that conversation on the 19th.
Yeah, it's gonna be a good one because I know Daniel and Jennifer both have done a lot in that area, so I'm kind of excited to be there
Yeah,
as
they
well.
have. Yeah, I'm excited.
So there's a lot of other questions in there, and I know everybody's coming close to time. So if you'd like to connect, we can chat via video meeting or an email. Use either one of those to connect with me, and we could chat through Spark and any of the details that you would like to discuss. And we have a lot of stuff on our DLS YouTube channel. Feel free to check out the videos there. Let us know that you got there from this webinar, so we can talk back to you there through the conversation, the comment section within YouTube as well. And if anybody's interested, we do have our MSIDT program, which is our competency-based program for instructional design and technology that utilizes, how to utilize AI to help build courses, things like that. So it brings a human part into it as well. Joanna, any final thoughts?
Just thank you, everyone. Really appreciate you being here.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. Have a fantastic week, and thanks for coming.